calling Gray Zone Warfare an extraction shooter, especially after its latest update, just feels completely inappropriate. When I think of an extraction shooter, I picture playing inventory Tetris in the main menu, then sitting through a loading screen to drop into a timed raid on a specific map. But when Gray Zone launched into early access last year, it seemed poised to disrupt the entire genre by ditching those loading screens, the concept of a timed raid, and instead gave us a persistent map that more or less never slept. But until their latest update, many of their ideas were just not working correctly, and it made me want to play just a classic extraction shooter instead of this hyped up evolution to the genre. Sure, the Unreal Engine 5 graphics were incredible and the world was massive, but just so many of the mechanics and ideas behind the game weren't working. You still had to return to your base after every single mission. Exploring the open world just wasn't rewarding. There was basically no incentive to do it, and the missions were all just variations of go here, hold the F button to do the thing, and then you've done it. But then the Winds of War update dropped, and a lot of that changed. This changed so much that I think Gray Zone Warfare is finally starting to not only become a good game, but it might actually be pushing the genre forward and giving us a reason again to start getting excited about these milsim extraction style games. This is really evolving the genre and not just copying and pasting features. Now, the game is still far from perfect, and I'm going to talk about some of its lingering issues in a little bit, but to catch you up to speed, if you haven't played Gray Zone or you've missed my previous coverage of the game, this title stumbled out of the gate last year as an early access experience on Steam. Major technical issues and a lack of content led to the game losing 90% of its audience in just a few months, and it did build up quite a significant audience right away because the trailers looked amazing. It just didn't have the content to back it up. And as far as I know, this wasn't really a surprise to the devs. I think the early access was very much a push to get some funding so that they could really realize the full concept of the game. And despite Gray Zone's incredibly impressive graphics, it really is a good looking game, the gameplay just felt unfocused and repetitive with buggy AI, a massive map that was more frustrating than fun to explore. The performance issues alone also made the game borderline unplayable for many players on average systems. So once the initial wow factor of the visuals wore off, players were left with an unfinished and relatively shallow experience. However, the devs have been putting that initial early access funds to good use, and the game's second major content update, Winds of War, has completely shifted Gray Zone's trajectory. I jumped in when it went live, and honestly, I haven't been able to put it down. The experience finally feels more rewarding and cohesive, making it much easier for me and I think many other players to actually connect with the game world. Basically, this update, in my opinion, has finally made the gameplay click. And a major factor of this are the new combat outposts that your factions can secure, which act as kind of mini base camps scattered around the map. If you die, you can choose to respawn at the nearest COP your faction has secured, cutting your travel time back to your dead body from 5-10 minutes down to just a few at most. This makes exploring far less of a chore and actually encourages you to do it. Finally, being out in the wild and just wandering the landscape doesn't feel like it's not worth the effort. I was on my way to the airfield and I noticed some smoke billowing up in the tree line. Before this update, I wouldn't have even considered checking it out unless I had a mission giving me a reason to do so. Now, however, I ended up wandering into a fishing camp, cleared it out, and I even got some great loot from it. There's also a huge quality of life update to player identification that gives everybody in your faction the same armband. This has made teaming up with random players and avoiding friendly fire so much easier. Just keeping track of friend versus foe was an absolute nightmare before, and I died many times just waiting to try and identify a player and figure out if they were friendly or enemy, and they would take the first shot. Now at a glance you can tell who's friendly, and it finally feels like I'm fighting other players instead of afraid to fire my gun. Many of the missions have also been reworked for the better, with additional objectives that feel a bit more grounded and realistic. Some are now multi-step, where you have to go to an abandoned vehicle, secure some supplies, and then drop them off at a specific house nearby. Others have just simply had their locations moved to be more accessible or interesting for the gameplay. Plus, now you can accept and turn in missions while you're out in the field. This has been a huge boost to my enjoyment of the game. Constantly having to return to the base to turn in quests and then get a follow-up quest and head back out really just slowed down the pacing of the game, especially when they give you a follow-up quest to like go back to the exact same spot you had been to. It was beyond aggravating. And since launch, the devs have been adding a ton of new weapon parts. There's over 60 new locations to explore. They've improved the AI. There's a mortar strike system and just kind of pages and pages of tweaks and changes that overall push the game forward in just about every area. The new dynamic weather system with rain is just straight up impressive. It pools up and runs down the terrain realistically, and in low areas like some of the rice paddies, they actually fill up over time. I honestly wasn't expecting this level of detail, but I guess they're really just trying to maintain that high visual standard on the weather system as well. Now, getting back to the combat outposts, because I think they're probably the biggest part of why this game feels like it's finally moving in the right direction. All of them start off as neutral points for any of the 3 player factions on the map. Once you clear and secure the base by interfacing with the cop radio, you can access your stash, collect mission rewards, and outfit your character. If you die, you can select the nearest cop to respawn it. And the overall effect of these has made the game less punishing. There's more PvP focus, and it's really made the entire map much more accessible for exploration, mission running, and combat. Before this update, you had very little incentive to go off the beaten path other than to just look around. If you died too far from a landing zone, you'd be better off just rearming back at the base and carrying on with your missions versus recovering your gear because it was just too far away. But these new combat outposts really fix one of the biggest problems with the game. They also serve as a natural gathering point for players working on missions that are in the same area. Instead of everyone clustering at the main base and then scattering out across the map, probably to never run into each other again, cops create opportunities for more organic teamwork and spontaneous encounters. If you need help with a tough objective, chances are that if there's other players there, they're going to be working on the same objectives. Now, of course, there is a flip side to this whole new accessibility, and that's that when you die in PvP combat, it feels way less consequential. Before, a dead player's only means of getting back into the action quickly was flying in on a helicopter, which was very loud, it announced your return, and so whoever killed you basically knew that you were coming back and to be on the lookout. With the cop respawns, the notion that you've cleared an area after a PvP fight kind of goes away. The player you killed will silently respawn at a nearby location, giving them both the element of surprise and the ability to re-engage you before you've even had a chance to fully heal up. They also kind of downplay the risk of losing your gear if you die, since you can get it back so quickly. This really reduces the stakes of a firefight and honestly makes the game feel a little more Call of Duty-ish than maybe it should. I think there's a lot of play in here to try and find the right balance, and since this is really the first iteration of this new system, they got time to do so. There's a lot of easy fixes to balance this out. You can have respawn timers, you can have the bases launch a flare or something when a player respawns, just some sort of indicator that the enemy you killed is back and to be on the lookout for them, or just something to give you enough time to loot and get out of there. Another thing that I think the devs need to tweak is the new conflict zone system. Basically, anytime there's PvP combat, a small circle is added to the map, pinpointing the firefight's location. This is good in the sense that it gives your faction a heads up that there's enemies in a certain area. It can point you in the right direction if you're looking for some PvP. The problem is the circle on the map for the conflict zone is small enough that it basically gives away the enemy player's exact position when combining it with the sounds of their gunfire. I think conflict zone markers should be more generalized, so it's not direct intel but more general intel. The stealth mechanics in Gray Zone could also use a little bit of work. Currently, crouch walking and using a suppressor is how you play stealthily. If you do anything that deviates from that, like mantling over a fence, every enemy in the area is suddenly alerted to your presence and knows exactly where you are. And I get that that could be seen as realistic in some situations, but on the flip side, I don't think crouch walking is sort of the end-all be-all to stealth gameplay mechanics. They could certainly evolve the system to be more nuanced. Now, despite all the massive improvements, especially with this latest update to Gray Zone, the game still suffers from performance. The frame rate in major towns will drop into the 30s on a mid-tier system, and that's without having the graphics cranked up to the max. I can't even imagine how poorly the game runs on low-spec hardware. And I get that it's still technically an early access title, but it's been in early access for long enough to focus on some of the important optimization passes and fixes. The low FPS and high frame times make tracking targets extremely challenging. And in a game like this, where every shot can be the difference between life or death, the last thing you want is a crappy performance, crappy frame rate. With the recent debut of Unreal Engine 5.6, Gray Zone may want to look into an engine update to see if they can take advantage of some of the more optimized tech. However, engine upgrades are a pretty lengthy process, and it would mean slowing down other parts of development, so it's a tough situation to be in. But I do think that the performance problems for the game are probably going to end up being one of the bigger limiting factors on how big Gray Zone can grow. So ultimately, I do think that these devs can get it there, and I hope they haven't engineered themselves into a performance corner that they can't get out of. And performance stuff aside, I've been having an absolute blast, and I keep hearing the same thing from other players who are hooked as well. I also think it's kind of weird to continue calling Gray Zone an extraction shooter. The Winds of War update makes it feel less like you're going on raids to specific areas with the goal of just completing a mission and extracting with the loot, and more like you're engaging in a persistent operation while completing tasks that help give your faction an advantage, with some of those fun extraction mechanics and PvP combat on top of it. And that feels like what the devs were going for all along. The new pacing seems to bring that loop more to life. Winds of War has made the game more fun and accessible without sacrificing the core identity as a hardcore tactical FPS. It feels like Gray Zone is finally realizing its concept, and the concept is actually good. And now, especially, I can't wait to see what the future updates hold for this game, since I'm already enjoying what it currently is. Hopefully that performance becomes a major push for the devs in the near future. I hope you guys enjoyed this coverage of Gray Zone Warfare. I'd be curious to know what your experiences are with the game in the comments. Let me know, and give me a thumbs up if you did like the video, subscribe for more content like it. And up next, check out just how good Grand Theft Auto 5 can look with the right mods installed. It's kind of crazy just how good this, well, very old game can look. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.